Assisted living meets assisted dying. Today on Context, we examine Canada's Supreme Court ruling on physician-assisted death and its consequences on our most vulnerable citizens.
Assisted living in Canada has made enormous strides in recent decades. Now a Supreme Court ruling legalizing physician-assisted death has disability advocates alarmed. Today on Context, we delve deep into the hard questions. Specifically, will disabled lives be more vulnerable with an increased acceptance of euthanasia? Coming up, MP Steven Fletcher supports the Supreme Court decision. Alex Schadenberg of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition does not. Frontline disability advocates from Christian Horizons and L'Arche Canada also weigh in on the decision and how it could adversely affect their clients. But first, a young woman who feels her life is at risk because of the Supreme Court ruling on assisted death.
Our first guest is Chantal Huenink. She is soon to be a social worker. She's a student at Laurier University where she lives with cerebral palsy. Chantal, welcome to Context.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, you have wanted to speak out on the Supreme Court ruling as how it affects people with disabilities. So they have ruled this is discussion over. We are going to start doctor-assisted dying in Canada. Why do you want to speak out against it?
Yes, I understand that ruling has been made, and that makes me quite sad for the effects that it will have on people with disabilities and Canadians in general. When I was 11 years old, so a year younger than Tracy Latimer, the Tracy Latimer case hit the news, and that was so problematic for me because I was also born with cerebral palsy, and I firmly believe that the only difference between Tracy and I was the fact that I can speak and she cannot. And so she and what happened to her has been my primary inspiration for speaking out for those who cannot speak for themselves.
So what do you think we're going to miss in Canada for people like you? What's going to happen to you?
As a person who faces challenges, I have to try potentially harder than people without disabilities to show that my life is of value and that I have something to contribute. And the ruling that says that my life is more about suffering and that I should maybe not be here as long as someone else might be, potentially gives the general public the idea that I have less to contribute.
But the ruling is very clear that you have to give consent. The only time physician-assisted death will be allowed is if consent is given, and a person has to be competent to give that consent. Do you think that still puts you at risk?
I appreciate those safeguards very much, and certainly they are safeguards. That's why they are put in place. But I know of many people with various challenges who are very much influenced by the medical community that they look up to, and they see families and friends struggling with their challenges. I think that if people know that their family members are suffering or that their patients are suffering, this may be a recommended course of action that is actually not in one's best interest.
So as the person, you, who would be suffering, you're saying, hey, doctor, you're taking this harder than I am, or hey, mom or dad, you're taking this harder than I am.
Correct.
Let me live.
Correct. Essentially, I think that my life is more valuable to the world than just my own experience. And even if I am suffering, I think that it is not my choice to decide when to leave this earth.
Okay, you're bringing up God. You're bringing up God, not your choice. The polls are very bleak. Even religious people are saying, come on, let us make our own choices on this. We don't have to let God be the ender of our life. You're in social work. You've added a master's degree in theology. Why are you bringing the study of God into social work?
Your social perspective is informed by your faith and vice versa. And because I have been a woman of faith, and that's mainly where my courage comes from, I think it's really important to infuse that in the work that I do to serve and support others.
10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'm struggling with dementia or I'm struggling with some kind of cancerous disease, and I say, you know what, I think I should just pull the plug?
Well, people think that maybe our lives shouldn't be lived anymore if they're not joyful. And I'm of the opposite side of the spectrum, saying that perhaps suffering gives us a greater value and a greater purpose to witness to others. There have been a lot of people in my life who have assumed that I'm suffering when actually I have a really great quality of life. And I'm very happy to be on this planet to do what I can do and do what I've been gifted to do. And so the idea, what will we miss? We'll miss individual people with God-given gifts to contribute to this world.
Chantal, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. Legislatures both federally and provincially will wrestle with fears like Chantal expressed and the freedoms that others are demanding. Member of Parliament Steven Fletcher is a Conservative Member of Parliament. He advocates in favor of assisted death. And Alex Schadenberg is the Executive Director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. He argues against it. Thank you both for joining us. Let's look first at what stage this court-mandated legislation is at. And Steven Fletcher, let's start with you. We've got an election coming October 19th. What stage is the legislation at?
Well, the Supreme Court has ruled that physician-assisted death for terminally ill or people who are experiencing intolerable suffering is legal in Canada. So that debate is over. The Constitution has been interpreted by the Supreme Court, and the government will have to reply within the framework of the Constitution. Some people may say, well, you can use the notwithstanding clause. That is not going to happen on this issue. So what we need to do as Canadians, have a dialogue on how we want to proceed on ensuring that we protect the vulnerable, but at the same time protect what is now a Canadian right, and that is to have physician-assisted death for competent adults.
Alex Schadenberg, you just heard Steven say, we're finished the dialogue on whether this is going to be allowed in Canada or not. It is court mandated now. And you've been leading this lobby against euthanasia for a couple of decades now. Over 80% of Canadians are saying, give us this autonomy, give us the ability to start killing ourselves when we want it. How do you feel about the uphill battle you're facing on this?
The reality is I don't think that the information that Canadians need to hear has been heard. The fact is it's not a safe thing to allow euthanasia or assisted suicide. So if we're going to accomplish something, as Steven had suggested, that it be, protective of people with, concerns about vulnerability, then how are you actually going to accomplish that within the framework of the Supreme Court decision or within the framework of future legislation is a very tough question to answer.
Canadians with disabilities are also saying they think they want this right. What's your take on safeguards for this?
The polls overwhelmingly show that Canadians are asking for this. And as far as disabled Canadians, I'm a disabled Canadian, at the end of life, provided that you're a competent adult, would like to have the same empowerments that anyone else who is not disabled has, including ending one's life.
Alex, what happened to religious opposition against euthanasia? It looks like it's evaporated.
Whether someone is religious or not, I think they should all be opposed to euthanasia and assisted suicide. And the reason is sort of clear. We as human beings, and this is what you see in the poll, we do fear a bad death. That's true. Like, people have fear of a bad situation, whether they're religious or not religious. It wouldn't make a difference. We seem to have the same reactions to the realities. But the question is it safe now to allow someone else to cause your death, especially when we consider the reality of the human being, that as an emotional being or as a physical being, if I'm going through difficulties, I might become very depressed. I might become very down. How are you to know that I'm competent? It's a very difficult thing to do. So when we're talking about this, we have to realize that are some people's lives going to be taken, A, without their consent? That's the first question. And secondly, are people actually going to be making these decisions not because they actually are truly seeking a right to die, but because they're going through that deepest, darkest time of their life and they really need good support, and they're not getting it.
Okay.
They're not getting proper end-of-life care, and they're not getting the supports they need at that time.
What do you think is at stake spiritually as we debate this issue in Canada? Stephen?
As far as spirit goes, I would say it's up to the individual cognitive Canadian. We can't be in a situation where we're imposing our values or one person's values on someone else. And particularly when it comes to end-of-life issues, there are caveats that need to be done. If you refer to my legislation, you'll see that there's many caveats that address the concerns that Alex has raised, and I'm open to further suggestions on amendments. I hope that no matter what, that we deal with this issue with empathy, compassion, love, hope, and mercy.
Thank you both for joining us today, Honourable Steven Fletcher, Conservative Member of Parliament, and Alex Schadenberg, Executive Director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. When we come back, Christian Horizons and L'Arche speak into the Supreme Court ruling on behalf of people with disabilities. Assisted dying gets a challenge from assisted living when we return. Head to our website, contactswithlorna.com, for your chance to win a free copy of Being Mortal. It's my pick for the topic we addressed this week on the Supreme Court ruling calling for doctor-assisted dying. Being Mortal is a doctor's account on the goals of medicine when it comes to facing death. I think it's a must-read. Dr. Gawande helps us face important questions of caregiving and the end of our lives. For a chance to win your free copy, head to contactswithlorna.com and click on Lorna's Books.
I'm Rose Meter. I'm a mom, a wife, and an ER doctor in rural Canada. This year, my husband Rob and I have decided to take our 4 kids on a trip around the world. We have no idea what lies ahead. I'll be updating our journey on the Context with Lorna Duick website with blog posts and videos about our triumphs and trials and adventures. Won't you join us?
This segment is brought to you by Bruce Etherington and Associates, Family Harmony and Philanthropy, helping you help others.
Well, way back in 1967, I wrote these words: "It is important to be able to stand alone for what is right. But the virtue lies not in the aloneness of one's stand. If it be good for one person to stand erect for a righteous cause, then it is far better that many should join shoulder to shoulder for what is good." I recognized that we were to stand for the rights and the benefits and the blessings of people with special needs, but it would be so much better if many other people were standing with us for that cause.
Well, today we're looking at Canada's pending legislation on euthanasia and how it will impact Canadians who live with developmental challenges. And to help us understand this, we're joined by Janet Nolan, the CEO of Christian Horizons, and John Guido, Ontario Regional Leader for L'Arche. Welcome you both. You're leaders in the disability community. Janet, let's start with you. The Supreme Court ruling has said the law is going to change. Doctor-assisted suicide must happen in Canada. Why are you worried this will negatively impact Canadians with disabilities?
Thanks, Lorna. It's great to be here. Our concern is that who's going to make the decision on behalf of somebody who may be perceived as not being able to have a voice of their own. Our concern is that oftentimes people with developmental disabilities are left out. Their people make decisions for them. Others who may not understand or appreciate the potential for contribution and their ability to be a part of our communities and our country might make decisions that could lead to an early death.
Do you feel threatened by the Supreme Court ruling?
Our concern is that any law that's crafted, any new legislation that's put in place will not consider the fact that while there's comment on people have to consent for themselves, if someone is deemed unable to consent for themselves, what does that mean for that person? Who is going to judge what their quality of life is or what suffering means? And that's the work that we need to do right now.
Okay, John Guido at L'Arche, you work with people who cannot always give consent. What do you think we need to keep in mind about this? You know, here the court ruling is, hey, everyone's going to be able to give consent. Are you assuaged with that, or are you alarmed?
Thanks, Lorna. We're very deeply concerned, particularly for those people who do not have a voice and whose lives are not seen as valuable. The environment in which choices are being made is just as important as the process. Jean Vanier speaks a lot about competition, and in our world there's even a competition for resources in terms of medical care, and who is deemed worthy of receiving supports. People with significant physical, psychiatric, and intellectual disabilities experience this at every stage of their life. They can't compete, and they are deemed often people who aren't worthy of having the procedures that would help them live and live well.
Okay, well, from the Christian Horizons file, Janet, you've got some great storytelling there, and I want to take a look at the kind of Canadian we're talking about that may not be deemed worthy of resources if we start parsing out medical services in that kind of materialistic tone. Take a look at this from your files.
She can come and go when she wants. She doesn't have to worry about anybody getting into her things. She can have her friends, her family, or anybody over whenever she wants. And decorating her own way, having her own things around that make her comfortable, and just her own space.
Part of the reason Liz's story is so great is that she's coming from the institution to now living on her own, living in the community, being fully accepted by her community, and she cares for them, they care for her. We do our best to support her, but she cares for herself.
She's gone through a lot of things in her life that you would never wish on anyone, and I think that she is where she is today because she chooses to see the good things in the world and the good things in people.
Our goal is that people can live out their full independence and to let them use their God-given gifts and talents in their community. And Liz is the perfect example of how she is a valued, needed member of her community, and she belongs out there.
Okay, Janet, when you have taken clients like Liz for medical appointments, you have personally encountered pressure to quickly sign DNR, when if it had been someone like me or you, no one would have pushed a DNR across the table to us.
Yeah, it seems like when a person with a developmental disability presents with something like pneumonia or something that you or I would easily be treated for, one of the first questions that a medical professional might ask is there a do not resuscitate order on this person's file? Which means instead of focused on treatment and getting the person better, the first question would be, is this person's life valuable? Is this person's life worth intervening into? And that is a regular experience for us. Certainly we don't sign DNRs as a service provider, but families are often pressured to consider that. There's almost an understanding that maybe there's already a do not resuscitate order on this person's file, which is actually not even possible, but it's often a question that we get asked.
John, you're nodding. What safeguards then should be in place?
I think the essential thing is that each person has a strong circle of support and advocacy in their lives. Without that, without a loving community of family, friends, and other advocates, there aren't those people to ask the tough questions and to help decisions being made.
Janet and John, you both bring a Christian ethic to your work. Tell me, Janet, how this forms the way Christian Horizons is approaching this issue of quality of life for people with disabilities.
Sure. 50 years ago and today, Christian Horizons stood and stands on the fact that we believe that all people are created in God's image and that all people are intrinsically valued by God. We believe that you have something to contribute, I have something to contribute, a person with a developmental disability has something to contribute, a person with a mental illness has something to contribute. And we believe that it's not just people are not just defined by their suffering and their challenges. They're also defined by their relationships and their ability to bring a smile or to be a friend. The video that we looked at about Liz, she has so much to offer her community, and what a tragedy it would be if her life was ended early upon a decision based on purely a medical diagnosis or someone else's perspective on her quality of life or suffering.
John, we've wrestled with religion, belief in God, and God being the one who ends life, even when it is of a quality we never hoped it would be. Help us understand the perspective you bring with God's view in mind on this issue.
I think fundamentally that dying is a part of the human experience. It's part of life. Suffering isn't necessarily something to be avoided, nor death. They're part of the human reality, and through them, God works. We have discovered, and L'Arche is also 50 years last year, and we've lived a long journey with people through many times of suffering and loss and death. And in those moments, much is revealed about who the person is, and there's a tremendous capacity when they have a loving and supportive environment.
Janet, what do you do if you do not have a loving and supportive environment?
And that's part of the challenge, Lorna, is that there's a lot of people in Canada and in Ontario who don't have a loving and caring environment. There are families that are struggling to get by just every day because they don't have the services and supports that they need. So we have a lot of work to do about how people with disabilities are recognized as citizens in our country. We want to see governments create more and more opportunities so that people can fully contribute and be contributed to in their communities. We want to support families. We want to educate families and help families so that they don't get to that dark place that the Latimers got to. There's such a tragic, tragic circumstance, but there's lots of those tragedies happening. Maybe not on the front page and at the Supreme Court, but there are tragedies happening.
And the tragedies are part of why the legislation is being pushed as it is through the court. Thank you both for teaching us what it's going to take to do assisted living right in this whole big subject of death. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, John Guido, the regional leader of L'Arche, Ontario, and Janet Nolan, the CEO of Christian Horizons, thank you both very much. Well, Sheldon, thoughtful things to work over. How about a question for our audience?
Thank you so much, Lorna. Well, Canada has 1 year to prepare legislation in response to the Supreme Court's decision in favor of physician-assisted death. What conditions or protections do you want in this new law? We always welcome your comments and opinions, so give us a call at 1-800-215-4913, or you can also write to us by email at comments@contextwithlorna.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Context TV.
When we return, the spiritual work in the challenge of wanting to end our own life on our own terms.
We are kind of unique at the SIL program because we're able to be a team. All of us have gifts and abilities, and we just kind of fit together where we can help out best. Kevin worked 8 to 4, Monday to Friday. The foreman in charge said they couldn't have done the job without Kevin and his help. So much of independence is just feeling like you can do it. Sometimes we just make people dependent, but once they have that autonomy and a little bit of authority over their own life, it changes everything, and they're willing to take a risk and try it, and it usually works out great. You don't really need my help much, do you? I know. Yeah, you're doing great.
Head to our website, contextwithlorna.com, for your chance to win a free copy of Being Mortal. It's my pick for the topic we addressed this week on the Supreme Court ruling calling for doctor-assisted dying. Being Mortal is a doctor's account on the goals of medicine when it comes to facing death. I think it's a must-read. Dr. Gawande helps us face important questions of caregiving and the end of our lives. For a chance to win your free copy, head to contextwithlorna.com and click on Lorna's Books. Coming soon on Context, T.D. Jakes, the remarkable motivational pastor, sits down with Sheldon Neal in Dallas, Texas, to talk about dreams and the motivation it takes to make them come true. You won't want to miss it. Life unworthy of life sounds like it could fit our push towards euthanasia. We want autonomy. No one wants to suffer beyond their will. Why not? Well, I'll quote from Alfred Delp, a German Jesuit executed by the Nazis in 1945. In his day, life unworthy of life was a Nazi propaganda slogan which fueled the killing of disabled Germans. Delp fought back with these words: even if all of a person's organs have given out and he no longer can speak for himself, he nevertheless remains a human being. To those around him, he remains an ongoing appeal to their inner nobility, to their inner capacity to love, and to their sacrificial strength. Take away people's capacity to care for their sick and to heal them, and you make the human being into a predator, an egotistical predator that really only thinks of his own nice existence. Well, that's a challenge which requires me to dig deep into understanding why God's ethic of life is valued as it is. So we've got resources on the Supreme Court ruling on our website, links to L'Arche and to Christian Horizons, and the help they offer, the lessons they've learned from 50 years of thinking these issues through. Our website has a feature video on how my own family is dealing with this issue of suffering. It's called Pressing On. Take a good look at it there as well. For all of us, I'm Lorna Dueck. Thanks for watching, and join us next week as we explore life beyond the headlines. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. You're such a good part of this. Thank you.